Well, hey there, Southern Oregon. Welcome back to the Real Estate Show. So glad you could join us today. I'm Alice Lema. I'm a broker here with John L. Scott Real Estate in beautiful Southern Oregon. And today we're going to be talking to Guy Giles from Mutual Mortgage. And we're going to go a little deeper into the economy, talk about the latest additional interest rate increase from the Federal Reserve Bank. Yes, folks, we have another one coming, and how that all affects our local Southern Oregon housing market. So stay tuned for Guy Giles from Mutual Mortgage. He'll be on shortly. In the meantime, let's take a quick peek at our local statistics this week. These are for all three counties, and they are single-family residential only. Let's start with Josephine County. Josephine County prices year over year are down 18% for an average single-family residential home costing $422,520. The number of solds year over year in Josephine County are down 25%. The number of listings year over year in Josephine County are down 15%. Let's look at Jackson County. Prices year over year this week in Jackson County are down 8%, with an average price of $454,772. The number of solds year over year this week in Jackson County are down 48%, and the number of listings year over year in Jackson County this week are down 21%. Let's look at Klamath Falls. The prices in Klamath County are down 7% year over year this week to an average $367,345. And again, that's single family residential only. Klamath County number of solds year over year this week are down 35%, but we have a little bit of good news. The number of listings in Klamath County year over year this week are up 11%. So yay for Klamath County. Now, Jackson County and Josephine County, anybody who's thinking about selling their house next year, you might want to put it on the market now. We still have a shortage. It's still a little bit of a seller's market, and we still have plenty of buyers out there that want to write contracts. So give it some thought. In the meantime, let's bring on Guy Giles of Mutual Mortgage to talk about what's going on in the economy and our local housing market, how the interest rate increase, yet another one, is going to affect things here in Southern Oregon. So stay tuned for our interview with Guy Giles. We'll be back after a quick word from our sponsors. We're gratefully brought to you by John L. Scott, Ashland, Medford, Guy Giles, Mutual Mortgage, and our local Rogue Valley Association of Realtors. Thank you much, folks. Stay tuned for Guy Giles. Well, welcome back to the Real Estate Show, folks. Alice Lema. I'm a broker, and John L. Scott here in beautiful Southern Oregon. And we get to talk to Guy Giles of Mutual Mortgage again today. Thanks for being back on the show, Guy.
Hey, well, I'm glad to be back. I'm actually just glad to be indoors right now.
Right. Our typical Southern Oregon summer weather. Thank goodness for the lakes.
That's true. And they got more water in them than they have the last few years. So we can't really complain about that either.
Yep. It's why we love living here. Before we just went on the air, you were mentioning something about the health and status of some of the banking institutions nationally. Do you mind touching on that? I think it'd be interesting for the folks listening to hear about.
Yeah, I think just everybody's just, really struggling with, the rates and just, keeping business coming in the door. They had to keep their liquidity up. There are certain things that banks have to have in place in order to lend, and some of them are struggling right now. I think US Bank just laid off 350 people this week, and about 50 loan originators and 50 managers, which that's the numbers that we got in. I don't know how in the heck you have 50 managers with 350 loan officers, but maybe they were kind of heavy in management and just needed to readjust some things also. But, Wells Fargo had some pretty big layoffs. There's been, it hasn't been as crazy as 08 or anything, but there's definitely some pullbacks as far as that goes. And, I can't say I worry for these companies because obviously they're my competition, but I do worry about the regional small banks getting shut down because, this consolidation of everything into the big Googles of the world and the big, just all the big companies, the small businesses are what makes this country great. And
Right.
obviously I work for a very, very large company that's been around for a long time. So, I mean, there's a place for everybody, but I'm really hoping that the Fed and the policies don't squeeze out a lot of these regional banks that have traditionally done a lot of good lending in town, even though they're my competition. These are a valuable piece of our economy.
Well,
And
and don't they really support the small business enterprise
yeah,
entrepreneur kind of person more so than the big banks?
oh, 100%. And you can definitely have and I don't live in that world, but you can definitely feel that, you know, I want the girl, in a tower at Chase Manhattan, her to do my investments because that's what she lives and breathes and everything that she does. But at the same time, I want the guy down here that's on the ground, making small business loans to people to understand, what's going on in, just our environment. So I think it's really important to have a good mix and everybody, and competition is good. And you're right. These are the people that and the smaller banks that are loaning to the companies, and I'm hoping enough of that survives. It's just a little bit of a weird time, I
That's an understatement. Yeah.
so yeah, we're hearing these headlines and we're seeing this stuff happen, and it'll correct itself. I also worry about the ones that are gonna be around, because rates will drop. We will have our recession, and and hopefully they can right size soon enough to where they can at least get some people back in the into underwriting, into doing all the things that they're going to need to do to close loans once things turn around a little bit, and it will
So
turn around.
if there's layoffs in the mortgage industry, then that affects the speed
Well,
of how
generally what people
fast loans.
do, I mean, and I've been through a few cycles like this now, and that was a shame working for a really big bank at that time, because they're always trying to be right sized as far as, they'll start laying off underwriters, they'll start laying off, long before they lay off their salespeople. They'll have to just, not have a whole bunch of people getting paid high salaries to do nothing. So you'll see people fall out of there, and then rates drop a little bit, and now you don't have the back office support or the capacity to be able to close the loans that you need to close. So that's the weird vicious cycle. And then everybody gets on a hiring, just on a hiring binge. They try to hire enough people to be able to close the loans that are coming in, and they're green, don't know the systems yet. And then by the time they get up and the machine's working really, really well, it's time for them to start laying people off again. So it's kind of a bad cycle. And that's actually one thing that's was not supposed to be a plug for my company, but we've really tried to keep everything ready to go this whole time, and we feel really, really prepared. But I've lived through it working for a bank when these things kind of happen, and it's not a fun place trying to get a loan closed when half of your underwriters are laid off.
Well, we haven't seen a big shift, correct me if I'm wrong, since the housing crash.
Mm-mm.
09, 07, depending on where you were.
No,
So
no. Well, go ahead.
no, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say no, but we have been seeing for the last months that people are laying people off. So I assume that's going to kind of come back around again, where rates will drop. Like I said, we're right now, we're 15 months into an economic decline as far as the leading indicators go.
I'm glad you brought that up, because
So
yeah, I think we are too.
The last time that happened, guess.
The last time that was it the crash?
2007.
2007. Oh, wow.
Do we expect, catastrophic anything like that? No, I don't think so. But I do definitely, everybody's calling for, a recession. It's funny because everybody was calling for low rates around the middle of this year too. And even though they have come down some, that hasn't really happened yet. But the recession really should be here. I mean, consensus, is that it will be by the end of this year. That's actually going to help our industry in this valley. And, recessions are no fun, but at the same time, we need some relief on some rates and, then maybe open up some inventory, because that's our biggest issue right now, as far as, people can absorb a little higher rates in an inflationary environment because they're making a little bit more money than they were before.
So are you seeing
Also,
people's wages go up? Because as a lender, you're on the front line seeing people's applications. What's going on with wages?
Well, that's actually funny that you kind of mentioned that. I heard some numbers, and I don't think it's national averages. It's not necessarily right around here. And I don't think I went over this at all on the last program, but it's been some math, because that's kind of where my heart is. Everybody's wages, just as a whole, believe it or not, we're up $1,200 monthly since pre-COVID.
What?
I know it's national averages, though. It's not necessarily right around
Well,
here.
but even nationally,
But-
that's a big number, 1,200 a month.
Well, and people were able to go find a new job. People weren't willing to work, so if you just look at the actual people that are not working two part-time jobs, but the real ones where people had enough leverage to go out and either ask for a little bit more or change jobs, because they wanted to work at home or different things. That was the national average, was $1,200. So you figure if rates go up 1 percentage point, which actually, had gone up a little bit more than that, but 1 percentage point on the average house would mean about $350 in a higher payment. So if you're making $1,200 more, take out maybe 30% for taxes, you're still over $300 ahead of where you were before the rates went up. Meaning, your income's up after, just apples to apples. By the time you're all said and done, you're still making more than you're losing in that higher rate. So it's still not.
Oh, that's interesting. It really is all about the math.
Yeah,
and the monthly
and
payment.
I apologize. My phone rang right in the middle of that. And
Oh, no.
probably didn't articulate that absolutely correctly. But, obviously, when I say apples to apples, the price of them are up a little bit. So inflation, eats into that whole $1,200 that you're making. But if you're just looking at it as buying a house, you're still ahead, because you're making more money than you were pre-COVID. Even though rates are up, there's still a buffer in there where you're, technically a little bit ahead of the game. So anyway, no more phone calls.
Well, and what else I think people forget is that you have a place to live. And nationally, I don't know what it's like to be a tenant in some of the other parts of the country, but here in Southern Oregon, our tenants are really, really struggling with inventory. I mean, yes, we have a shortage of houses to sell, but wait till you try to go out and rent something. And we don't have a lot of new landlords jumping into the business. So that idea of having your own place to live so you're not vulnerable to a landlord deciding to sell or something, I think that just needs to be given more weight, but it's not a financial thing. It's more of a life security thing.
It's been a long time since I've been in that position, but I can absolutely attest to the fact that I do have people coming in all the time. Hey, they're selling my house. Hey, my rent raised. Hey, my house, they're not taking care of it. And which I don't hear that a lot, but I have had people that are just, really needing to be done with renting. And not having a place to go it's got to be a scary thing for a family, with, school getting ready to start back up, just whatever. I hope at some point we can figure out how to get some affordable housing for people with, the just working people, that you don't have to be somebody that's retired out of California to be able to afford a house here. And we all have kids in this valley, and it's just it's just a shame where a lot of this has gone. But I don't have an answer for that, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah, well, and it's like Brad Bennington from the builders organization talks about, there's a lot of other obstacles to creating more housing in Oregon.
When you're
So
90,000 into just the permitting process, and then you look at how much some of the legislation has come down, costs more just for the average appliance to go into the house. Yeah, it kind of goes against everything that's being said out loud. It's like behind the scenes, everything is just completely opposite of what they profess to be doing for people.
yeah, there is a housing shortage both for purchase and for tenants. And then Oregon has a unique set of laws that kind of make it hard to overcome all that. We're talking to Guy Giles of Mutual Mortgage. We're going to have to take a quick break here. We're thankfully brought to you by Guy Giles of Mutual Mortgage. Thank you for that. Helping us bring the show every week. We're also brought to you by John L. Scott, Ashland and Medford, and our local Rogue Valley Association of Realtors, also known as RVAR. We appreciate your generosity every single week. Just a reminder, this broadcast will be repeated tomorrow on Sunday at 6 p.m. on KCMX FM 99.5. We'll be right back with Guy Giles, more interesting conversation about economy and the mortgage industry. Well, hey, Southern Oregon, welcome back to the Real Estate Show. We're talking to Guy Giles today of Mutual Mortgage, and we're talking about recession. A lot of people are not convinced we're in one. You and I share that opinion that we have been for a while.
only because we, historically know how to look what defines one, but feds will catch up one of these days.
Yeah, and a lot of people, including yourself, have mentioned that you think the rates are going to go down. So
Yeah.
I know we're not Nostradamus, but let's talk about when that might happen and by how much.
Well, I love it when I'm right. It'll be a super nice feeling one of these days when that happens, because I honestly thought it would be by now. I was thinking mid-year, we'd be down, at least into the fives. Where I've been locking some people in, and at the low sixes lately. So I mean, it just depending on the circumstances, as far as what you're going to get. But I really do think still before the end of the year, we should be down another, maybe 0.5%. We're not at the height that we were at before. But the economy is definitely slowing down. I mean, the indicators, we had some jobless claims come in a little bit less today than they were. So last Thursday. So there were, a little bit of a hiccup as far as the rates go. But I think just under the surface, under the headlines, there's a lot going on that reporters, frankly, are too lazy to look at. They just get they just get fed something and they just regurgitate it all over the country, and everybody just buys into it. One of the things is the median house price. Supposedly that went down, and technically the median house price did go down. But
Yeah,
if you have not as many houses selling in a higher area, that doesn't mean that the middle ones are selling for less. Is all it meant was some people are not buying higher end houses in that particular month. So the middle or median price did go down just because it did, but it's not, you didn't have a price reduction in those markets necessarily. You just had one extreme side just kind of fall off for that month. So meaning instead of having maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, those 5 buckets, number 5 bucket is gone. So it's obviously going to shift the median down a little bit. But if you look as far as the National Association of Realtors, 1 in 3 houses sold for more than the listing prices. Redfin is saying as much as 50% of the houses are selling for more. So really what we have is people not buying the really high end stuff right at the moment, which doesn't mean next month that couldn't change. But that really didn't mean that the other people are dropping their prices. I mean, it's still strong as far as the houses that are going out. I mean, they're still selling in 30 days if you have a decent house. That, you know, and everybody kind of waiting around for this big correction for housing prices to tumble. I don't see that happening. We've been doing good loans for over 10 years now.
Right.
And people that are in their houses have qualified for those loans. This isn't something that I'm afraid it's going to happen at all. But I do think that we just need to get some more houses, which I know I'm preaching to the choir with a real estate agent here. We have buyers. We just don't have as many houses out there as we really need.
Well, and this week, in the 3 counties, listings year over year are down in Jackson County and Josephine County, but they're up in Klamath County. And I find that interesting because Klamath County has a completely different economic situation up there. And they're starting to see that their listing inventory is up over 10%, but that's year over year for the week. We're tracking like the micro movements, waiting to see, are we bottoming out? What are the trends? Is this going to get some legs and turn into a macro movement, right? Because they all start small, but
Yeah.
it all has to do with the inventory. And if we can get more inventory, our sales would go up. You know, the
That's
sales are all down, the number of sales, but it has to do with choices. There's just not enough on the market.
no, there's not. I'm just kind of looking at some numbers that I'd kind of put together before. You know, the inventory, it looks like it remained the same, you know, at about 1 million units. It's down year over year though, 13.6%. It's funny you
Is
said
that
that. I
national?
happen to have this piece of paper here because I never
Yeah,
know.
but are those
strictly
national
real.
numbers?
Yes, yes.
Okay, but see, that's very interesting because 13% nationally, I think that's kind of a big deal, don't you?
I do too. You know, we have like 3.1 month supply right now, and a normal market is like 4.6. Days on the market remained 18, down from 22 in April. I'm just kind of reading that one.
But see,
70
that's still technically a seller's market.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 76% sold in less than 30 days. So
Well, what does that tell you? If you price it right, it's clean, move-in ready. Look at
yeah.
that, 76% in 30 days. Wow.
And the funniest part is still our strongest thing. And I can kind of personally attest to this because I have 4 or 5 right now that are in contract that are first time home buyers. You know, people are getting into houses, and I mean, it looks like nationally 27% of the buyers right now, well, from last month, were first time home buyers.
That's awesome.
Cash buyers like 26% and investors 18%. So we don't want to overlook the, you know, we talk about landlords and different things. We definitely don't want to overlook the investors as far as that goes.
Yeah, it's just in Oregon, we're not the it girl for investors. Unless you're selling. It seems like a lot of people are selling and taking their investments other places. But it's
Let me
good to
tell you
know that those
something. I mean,
national
just
numbers.
honestly, I'm looking in Idaho right now for my next 2 investment properties.
Really? And
Yes.
how did you pick Idaho? Just out of curiosity.
Well, they're not on crack.
Okay.
Anyway, the simple answer that'll get edited, but I
No,
just,
we don't really edit things.
yeah. So anyway, that's how it feels. I mean, you talk about if you want your investment to be, you know, semi-safe, you might as well invest in something you believe in. And I believe in this place for a place to live, or I wouldn't live here. I think it's still a great place to come, great place to be. Thankfully, we're a little bit buffered down here, and people are, I don't know, it feels like everybody gets along down here a lot better than a lot of other parts of the country.
I
which
do.
is
There's
something to be said.
Yeah, I think
You know,
there's
I don't
less strife. Yeah, for
I don't
sure.
want everybody to agree with me on everything, but I want to be able to at least, you know, get along. And I do feel like that in this valley, which is kind of a unique thing. It's easy to get polarized with the politics and everything going on around the world and saying, let's move to a more liberal place. Let's move to a more conservative place. Why don't we just get along right here? It doesn't mean that may not move an investment someplace else, because you're right, it's not as attractive right now.
Well, and it has to pencil. So I'm just curious, like, don't want to pry, you don't have to be too open
No.
with your personal life, but are we talking about a multifamily, single family? What are the rents like?
Well, I mean, I still feel like I can get kind of whatever rent I want. It's just at the end of the day, this just happened to be a particular property that I have too much, it's been depreciated out. So, that ship kind of sailed. I have a lot of money into it. So I think I'd rather just sell it and buy 2 or 3 places in Idaho. Not that Idaho is that cheap or something. It's just, this is a more expensive property on the river. And if I can buy 2 or 3 places in Idaho with that money, then I think just long-term, not having something in the big fire danger also, because there's a lot of big timber on this property. And, I don't want to get hit with $7,000 a month for fire insurance either. So
Yeah, the jury's still out on how that's going to all go down. Well, and some of the nicer properties don't always make the best rentals. I think you worry more about them. They're more expensive to maintain unless you're doing the short-term rental model. I don't know that Riverfront would make a great rental. So
you
yeah.
can't see this on the radio, but if you look, there's a steel chainsaw on my desk with some mauls, because I was out at that house chopping down trees literally yesterday. Just, yeah, I mean, you
Doing your
there's
defensible
maintenance and things
space.
that go into properties like that. And that's the other thing. I'm looking to buy a couple of houses right in town, maybe Post Falls or something, where they're newer, that I don't have to do a whole lot of maintenance on. So, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. And if you're thinking about buying investments, I have some really good investment calculators and things that I can send off that you can look and see how the thing pencils out. So,
oh, that's great. That helps people decide on the rent to purchase ratio and all that.
just kind of your
Perfect.
return and anyway, does it make sense?
Well,
So,
this is very interesting because it seems that it's common, at least in the last few years, for professional investors to divest in Oregon, not just Southern Oregon, but just kind of in Oregon in general. And they're, moving their portfolio other places. And that's just how economies work. If you have an environment that's not helping your business grow, landlords are business people, then those business people make adjustments. And sometimes that means they take the properties to other states.
and if some, I mean, I'm obviously a business guy, but if it worked out to where there weren't any rentals here and everybody that grew up here could have their own house, that'd be an all right shift for me to have my investments in Idaho as far as that goes. So who knows?
Well, I just wanted you to hear that, at least in my world, it's super common. But yeah, and we sure do need more landlords, especially in Southern Oregon. It's a great business, but you just have to, know the rules and abide by them. And there's a lot of them.
And with inflation where it is right now, I think you could still raise your rents up to where, I mean, as much as you need to, as far as that goes. I think a lot of it just kind of speaks to getting somebody out if you ever needed to do that. But we can go into a whole investment day, some other time.
Well, but we have a few minutes left, and I'm curious, do you want to talk about your investor program? I'm assuming it's 20% down for non-owner occupied.
Well, yeah, you can do that all day long, but if you can somehow scrape together 25% down, the pricing is night and day.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, it really is. Another thing that's really changed in the last year and a half is if you buy a second home, it is exactly the same pricing as an investment property at this point. So there's no advantage at all to buying a second home. It used to be that you could have one and you get the exact same pricing as a primary residence, but that is completely gone at this point. And I don't know if that ever comes back or not, but I honestly thought about buying a second home and vacation rentaling it a little bit because they allowed for that. And now, anyway, that's changed a little bit. So
Well, hold that thought. We got to take a quick break. We're talking to Guy Giles of Mutual Mortgage. Do not touch that dial. We'll be right back after this quick word. Welcome back to the Real Estate Show, folks. We're talking to Guy Giles today of Mutual Mortgage. And boy, what an interesting conversation. Right before the break, we were just finishing up some investment thoughts that you had about your own portfolio. But let's also talk about what it's like to try to make a purchase with the 25% down instead of the 20% down. That sounded very interesting.
well, it's about risk, kind of the same thing. Actually, primary residences tend to go the other direction, believe it or not. I know this sounds really strange, but Dave Ramsey even got it wrong the other day on a program that I was listening to. If you have 20% down, and I'm probably going a little remedial for most people on the radio here, but that's always been the mark as far as, do you have to have mortgage insurance or do you not have to have mortgage insurance?
Yeah.
And believe it or not, a lot of times the rates are a little bit lower if you come in with less than 20% down. And the reason is, and I'm talking on a primary residence, not on an investment property.
Okay.
But on a primary residence, we have that extra set of, that extra assurance from the mortgage insurance company. They've underwritten it also, just like we have. So we have a second set of eyes on that piece of it. Plus, if somebody defaults, then that piece of it's covered for us. So I've actually seen rates a little bit lower with a little bit of mortgage insurance. And if you don't have to have it, I mean, it's like, don't go have mortgage insurance just because, you're going to get a little bit of a lower rate on your house. I don't know that necessarily pencils out, but if you really look at it, what I've been running into lately is people are just kind of like, hey, I've been in my house for 6 or 7 years. I've got a ton of equity in my house. I'm going to sell it and buy something else. And then they look and they just freak out because rates are a little bit higher. But one thing that I've been kind of working with people to look at is, if you have a truck payment, some credit cards, some different things, maybe you pay that stuff off instead of coming in with the full 20%, or instead of coming in with 25 or 30% on a primary residence. And now you just lost $700-800 in other debts. So your payment on your house going up a little bit is not the end of the world. A lot of times you're hundreds of dollars ahead from where you are sitting right now. And the only thing you're focused on is, I've got a 3.4% rate and I'm never, ever going to want to get out of that thing. But if you have $3,000 going out in your overall bills, that's another calculator that I kind of have that we can send out to people, just, on a case by case basis, where it tells you exactly what you're going to save. So maybe take some of that equity that you have, it was a good investment buying a house. You have $150,000 equity in the thing now. Instead of putting that all towards your next house, take 25, 30, pay off all of your other stuff. And then you're not freaking out every time the Fed raises rates. And B,
right.
A lot of the time, especially just because of this unique market, people can look at it like it's a negative thing because rates are up, but with housing going up like it was, with everything like it was, there's probably a rare opportunity to be able to just realize some of that equity that you have, take it, pay off some debt, have a lower payment than you'd started with, and you're in the house that you want to be in. So there's just a lot of different talks. I mean, I had a guy on a refinance. He did his loan with me. He was from Klamath Falls. And one of the things he was going to do was cash flow remodeling his house. Well, he just called me last week, like a long time after he did that. He said, I never got around to that. I couldn't afford it. I really want to refinance and pull some cash out, but I don't want my payment to be any more than it was. And I said, well, if that is truly the most important thing to you, I'm not a proponent of taking your truck and putting it into your house. But if you get rid of your $800 truck payment, you could pull a little bit of money out of your house and you're still paying less per month. And you have the $40,000 now to remodel your house. So people are looking at doing debt consolidations also.
Oh, that's an interesting idea.
On a refinance. So Ideally, don't get into all that debt to begin with if you can avoid it. But if you find yourself there, there is a lot of untapped equity in people's houses right now.
So I'm wondering how many people are doing I'm going to stay in my house and remodel thing because they have so much equity instead of selling their house and buying another one. I'm wondering how much that's playing into the shortage of housing inventory that we have for sale right now.
This is probably just one of 3 or 4 or 5 different things that are keeping people in their house right now.
Mm-hmm.
And, I do know at some point you have that second kid, you're going to need another bedroom, or that third kid, or, I'm still seeing a lot of people just wanting to get closer to their family.
Yeah.
And figuring out how they can get into someplace with an ADU or someplace where the family can all be together.
Mm-hmm.
Not a bad thing at all, but between first time home buyers and that sort of thing, that's a lot of what I'm seeing. I've actually had real estate agents call me this week that are doing that, buying 2-unit, place where mom and dad could be eventually.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of a grassroots movement. I think culturally we're not having as many of our elders go into assisted living. It's almost going back to the way it was when I was really little. Most of my family lived together. We didn't, because we lived in a city, but like all my country kinfolk, they all had grandma, great uncle, they had like 2 or 3 generations, and they had lived like that for years. It was super common. They thought we were the weird ones.
I know. Well, and it could be a perfect scenario. I mean, instead of having a really high bill, just have somebody watch your kids. If your parents, which that's just a delight to them to be able, well, probably most of the time, up on cookies and running around the house. It could be a huge blessing for everybody. The parents don't have to necessarily pay for a lot of daycare. They're not farming their kids out. The grandparents get to spend time with them, and then you're all together as the grandparents get older to kind of help them. And it's a really good way to do things. And I would like to see us get way closer to that kind of an environment than, something's becoming a little bit hard on us. So let's just send them off to the home. As I get older, that's more and more on my mind. So,
Well, and a lot of us can't afford it. The assisted living or the retirement homes are super, super expensive. But going back to the multi-generational lifestyles, just have a couple minutes left. How does that work with the lender? So if you get a grandma, like a Gen X and a millennial, you've got 3 of them. How do they fill out the application? How do you vet each person?
We just do them all together. Like, honestly, it would almost look like one person, because you're going to have your credit scores. So we always take the middle credit score from everybody. So whoever had the lowest middle one, as far as that goes, incomes will combine those, debts will combine those, basically. And we're just looking at the overall picture, but they can absolutely buy and do it like that. And if the grandparents aren't ready to do it, but they might have a little bit of money or income that the millennials and everybody can't put together, we have non-owner occupying co-borrower programs that they can help bolster the income as far as that goes, get that piece of property that they want now, and then eventually, kind of move in there. So there's not any hits for doing that at all. So there's actually a lot of different options out there right now for everybody. We're still looking at, for the person that writes off everything, well, we can get into more creative stuff next time. Yeah.
We're going to have you back. Have a great weekend, folks. Bye now.